On the 5th of February 2014, an ice storm came through southeastern Pennsylvania and took the power out for 715,000 homes. The utility called it the worst winter outage in the history of the company. Half an inch of ice on every line and every limb. Whole townships dark. The hardest hit families sat in cold houses for about a week in February, while crews came in from other states to put the wires back up. On our road, nobody noticed. I want to be careful how I say that, friend, because it is not a boast. There was no generator humming in our shed. Nobody had prepared for anything. The stove was doing on Wednesday exactly what it had done on Tuesday and would do again on Thursday. My wife had bread in the oven. The kitchen was 74 degrees. An English neighbor walked over on the third day to ask if we had heard when the power was coming back and stood in our kitchen a while, getting warm, and said a thing I have thought about every winter since. He said, "It's like it isn't even happening here." It was not happening here. That is the whole difference between a house that makes its own heat and a house that rents it. Today, most families in this country could not keep one room above 50 degrees for one night, without a wire in the wall or a truck in the driveway. And that is not because the old ways stopped working. Every one of them still works this morning, I know, because we are still using them. I am an old order farmer, 6th generation on the same Lancaster County ground. My family has farmed since 1791. I do not own this camera. A young English neighbor runs it, and the two of us made our peace about why. The old ways are dying outside our fences, and somebody who still lives them ought to say so. Most of what I am about to walk you through, my grandfather Amish kept in a ledger, half of it in Pennsylvania Dutch, from 1938 to the year he died. And he made me promise at his kitchen table that these ways would not die with me. This is me keeping my word. 25 of them, and some you will not have heard of. Number 10 burns for 12 hours on a single filling, has no moving parts and no wire of any kind, and it is still being built by hand by my neighbors, a few miles from where I am standing. Number 6 is a cast iron box our great-grandfathers fed from the room next door, and the Pennsylvania Ironworks quit casting them. It was around 1800. Most Americans have never seen one. And number 4, friend, number 4 costs under $200 in parts, and when it is running right, the exhaust comes out the pipe near room temperature. Nearly every bit of the heat stays in the house. None of these 25 faded because they quit working. They faded because a utility, an appliance company, or a fuel man got paid the day your family forgot them. That is not on you, neighbor. They are good at selling. Before we count down, tap subscribe. Not for me, because we are pulling buried knowledge back into daylight here, one week at a time, and you will want the next one. 25 down to 1, and the last one contains all the others. The question is not what the English world lost. The question is who got paid when it forgot, and how you take it back this winter. Picture my grandmother at 10 o'clock at night, lamp in one hand, standing at the stove before she goes up. She rakes the live coals into a tight heap at the back of the firebox, and then she takes the scoop and lays cold gray ash over the front half of that heap. Not to put it out, to starve it. A 1/4 inch of ash cuts the air to the coals. The fire stops eating and starts waiting. Come 5 in the morning, she rakes the ash off, lays 1 split of hickory on the red, and the kitchen is warm before the first child is down the stairs. Cost of that trick? A scoop of ash you already have. Nobody outlawed banking a fire. The thermostat furnace arrived, and the appliance advertising of the 1950s taught a whole country that tending a fire at night was backward. So the skill quietly stopped being handed down. It never stopped being handed down here. My wife banked our stove last night the same way, and I did not have to get up once. 8 hours of warmth out of a scoop of ash, friend. Never a bill. That one they stopped teaching. The next one they replaced with a second appliance. In an Amish kitchen, the cook stove is lit before 5 in the morning, and it does not go out until the house goes to bed. It cooks 3 meals, it heats the wash water, it dries the mittens on the rail. And while it does all of that, it heats the ground floor of the house, not as its job, as a leftover. That is the piece the English world gave away without noticing. A modern range heats a saucepan and nothing else. It is a very good machine for July, and a very poor one for January, and you are running a separate furnace all winter to do the job your cook stove used to do for nothing. In our house, from October to April, the kitchen is the warmest room in the building, and no separate heater ever runs in it. Not one. The gas industry sold this country a specialized cooker after the First War and called it modern. It was modern. It was also a second bill. Half your heat as a side effect of supper. That is not a trick, neighbor. That is how a house used to work. That one they specialized away. The next one runs on nothing but the heat already coming off the stove. Set a small metal fan on top of a hot stove and it begins to turn. No cord, no battery, no switch. The temperature difference between the hot base and the cooler top drives it, and it pushes the stove's heat out across the room instead of letting it stack against the ceiling. You will find one of these on stoves in Amish homes all through Lancaster and Indiana and Ohio. It's because it does real work and it does not require the one thing we do not have. Here is the thing worth sitting with: hot air stacks. In a room with a stove and no air movement, the ceiling can be shirt sleeve warm while the floor where the children are sitting is 10 degrees colder. Move the air even a little and you have gained a room's worth of comfort. A fuel you already burned. A stovetop fan runs $100 or so and lasts decades. An electric fan does the same job and stops the day the wire does. The heat was always there. You just have to make it walk. That one they never had to sell you. The next one is hanging in half the houses on this road. A Lancaster farmhouse in January. A heavy quilt hung on nails across the doorway between the kitchen and the front of the house, and it's... Now think about what that quilt actually does. It is not insulating much. It is dividing. On one side is the room you are heating. On the other side is a hallway, a parlor, and 3 bedrooms you are not heating at all until bedtime. Cut the volume in half and you have cut the fuel in half. That is not a theory, friend. That is arithmetic, and every family on this road runs it every winter. The English house does the opposite. One thermostat, every room the same temperature. Whether there is a soul in it or not. The gas industry sold that as the American standard in the post-war years, and it is the single most expensive habit in an American winter. You do not need a quilt. A heavy blanket on a tension rod in a doorway tonight will do it. Heat the family, not the floor plan. That one they talked you out of. The next one goes in the bed with you. Amos wrote this one in the ledger in the winter of '58, and it is 4 words in Dutch that come out about like this: stone to the foot. A flat soapstone or a common brick sits on the stove through supper. Before bed, you wrap it, newspaper first, then a wool sock or a scrap of blanket, enough layers that you cannot burn yourself, and you slide it down to the foot of the bed. 20 minutes later, the sheets are warm and they stay warm for hours. The Sears catalog sold soapstone foot warmers by the thousand a century ago. Then the electric blanket arrived and did the same job for a purchase price plus a line on the bill. Every month for the rest of your life, and it fails in the exact hour you need it most, which is the hour the power is out. A stone does not fail. It is a stone. Wrap it in enough cloth that it is warm and never hot, and never put it against bare skin. That is the whole safety rule. Paid once, works 100 years. And it works in a blackout. That one they put on the meter. The next one is about where the stove sits. Where a heater sits matters more than what it is. Put a stove against an outside wall, and a good share of what it makes goes straight through that wall into the yard. Put the same stove in the middle of the house, first floor center, or down in the basement under the main rooms, and every direction it radiates is the direction you live in. Heat rises through the floor into the bedrooms above it. Nothing is wasted on the weather. That is why Amish homes are built around the stove instead of the stove being fitted into a corner of a house. The building is designed to distribute what the fire makes. The English builder puts the chimney on the outside wall because it frames cheaper and it looks handsome from the road. Cheaper to build, more expensive every winter for the next 80 years. You are not moving your chimney this week, friend, but if you are ever choosing where a stove goes, choose the middle and know why your upstairs is cold. An inside chimney warms your bedroom. An outside chimney warms the sky. That one the builders decided for you. The next one is sitting on your stove right now. Notice something about the first 6, friend. Not one of them was outlawed. An advertisement replaced the banked fire. A specialized range replaced the cook stove. A thermostat replaced the quilt in the doorway. Every single one, somebody got paid the day it stopped being taught. And the ones coming get harder to explain away than that. Number 10, the stove with no moving parts is not far off now. Stay with me. Look at the top of an Amish cook stove any afternoon in February. There is a kettle on it. There is a Dutch oven. There is a skillet that came off the wall in 1954 and never really went back. That is 40 pounds of cast iron sitting in the heat, and it is not idle. Iron takes heat in while the fire is hot and gives it back slow when the fire drops. The kettle is not only for tea, it is a small battery and a humidifier at once, because dry winter air feels colder than damp air at the same temperature, and a kettle steaming all day fixes that for nothing. My grandmother never took the kettle off the stove, not once in any season I remember. Then the non-stick advertising of the 70s taught America that iron was heavy and hard to clean. And 40 pounds of radiating mass quietly left the American stovetop. A used skillet costs almost nothing at any sale in this county and will outlive your grandchildren. Set the iron on the stove and leave it be. Free radiator. That one they called old-fashioned. The next one costs about $12. A stove throws heat in every direction, and the direction pointing at the wall behind it is doing you no good at all. Worse than none, it is cooking that wall. So you put a sheet of metal behind it, standing off from the wall with an air gap, and two things happen at once. The wall is protected, and the heat that was going into the plaster comes back into the room where you are sitting. The old farm bulletins recommended reflectors behind an open hearth as the cheapest single improvement a family could make, back when a piece of tin cost pennies. Every radiator in every old European apartment has a reflective panel behind it. For the same reason, it is not clever. It is geometry. A sheet of aluminum flashing runs about $12. Mount it with a real air gap and proper clearance to your stove. That gap is not optional, it is what makes it safe as well as useful. $12 of tin and you get degrees back the same evening. That one they stopped stocking. The next one is glass. A window is a hole in your wall that you have covered with a 1/4 inch of glass. Even a good one loses heat faster than anything else in the building. The old answer was a second sash, a storm window hung on the outside from October to April, and the trapped air between the two panes did the work. Not the glass, the air. The other half of it was cloth, a quilt or a heavy curtain over the window at dusk, dropped every night and lifted every morning. Same principle, one more layer of still air. And it cost nothing but the habit. Storm sash never stopped working. Contractors moved to sealed replacement windows because they install faster and there is a sale in it. And now a family pays many thousands of dollars for a window package instead of hanging a curtain. If you rent, if you cannot touch your windows at all, you can still do the cloth half of this tonight. The window is the hole. Every layer you hang across it is a repair. That one they sold you a package for. The next one is the crack under your door. Get down on the floor by an outside door on a cold night and put your hand at the bottom of it. You will feel the winter coming in. A draft stopper is a tube of cloth filled with sand or rice or scrap wool laid along the bottom of the door. In this county, the children usually make them. Cost, a worn-out pair of trousers. Rag rugs are the same idea underfoot. A bare floor over a cold crawl space pulls heat out of a room and out of your feet all day long. A heavy rug is a blanket for the floor. Neither of these was ever banned or replaced. They were simply beneath the notice of anyone with something to sell, because there is no product in a rolled-up pant leg full of rice. And here is the honest math. All the small leaks in an ordinary house together add up to a serious share of what you are paying to heat. The finest furnace ever made cannot outrun an open crack. Stop the leaks first. Everything else on this list works better after. That one nobody bothered to sell. The next one is how we live from November on. An Amish farmhouse in January is not the same house it is in July. From first frost, the family moves. The kitchen and one main room become the house. Doors get shut. Quilts get hung. Rooms that do not need heating do not get heated. And nobody feels deprived about it, but because that is simply what a winter is. The English world calls this zone heating. And it was briefly fashionable during the oil crisis in the 70s. The government actually recommended it, and then gas got cheap again, and the recommendation quietly went away. The habit costs nothing, and it is worth more than any single piece of equipment on this list because it changes the size of the problem instead of throwing more fuel at it. Pick the room your family actually lives in this week. Shut the doors on the ones you do not. Watch what your fuel does. You do not heat a house, friend. You heat the people in it. That one convenience buried. The next one you wear. Second break, and I owe you a story on myself because I have not always been good at this. First winter my wife and I had our own place, I was determined to keep that house warm the way my father kept his. So I ran that stove hard, fed it all day, fed it again before bed, and I was through most of a winter's wood by the end of January and had to buy 3 cords off a neighbor. At the worst time of the year to be buying anything. That is not a thing you live down quickly on a road like ours. My father came over and walked through the house. He barely looked at the stove. He put his hand at the bottom of the front door, then behind the parlor door that stood open all day into a room nobody used, then flat on the window glass in the north bedroom. Then he said, "You are heating the outdoors and you are winning." Cost me 3 cords and a good deal of pride. To learn that the stove is the last part of the problem, not the first. 10 to go. The stack, and this is the part almost everybody gets wrong indoors. Something thin against the skin that moves moisture away. Wool over that. Something tight woven over the wool if you are going out into the wind. Wool is the piece that matters. It insulates even when it is damp, which is exactly the condition you are in after you have hauled wood or done chores, and it does not steal heat from you the way cotton does. Cotton is the one fibre our people avoid in the cold, and it is the one every English family sits around the house in all winter. Cotton holds water against your skin and pulls the warmth right out of you. A cotton sweatshirt at 62 degrees feels colder than a wool sweater at 58. The outdoor clothing industry rediscovered this exact stack about 20 years ago and charges a great deal for it. A wool base layer from a surplus store costs very little. If the house is cold, the cheapest degree you will ever buy is the one you put on. That one costs nothing but the switch. The next one you pile against the house. Walk around an Amish farmhouse. It's in late fall and you will find the bottom of it banked, straw bales, or leaves held in with boards piled against the foundation the whole way around. The reason is that the joint where your house meets the ground is one of the coldest lines in the entire building, and the wind runs along it all winter. Bank it, and you have put a dead air blanket around the base of the house and around whatever is in your cellar. Where it snows, the snow does this for you. Packed snow is a genuine insulator. Southern Extension Services have published its resistance value for decades, and 2 feet of it drifted against a north wall is doing more than most people would believe. Nobody has to buy snow. One rule, and it matters. When it thaws, that wet material has to come away from your siding, or you have traded a cold wall for a rotten one. The wind runs along the ground, neighbor. Put a coat on the bottom of the house. That one nobody could sell. The next one comes through the glass for free. The winter sun sits low and comes in the south side of a building at a shallow angle from mid-morning to mid-afternoon. That is free heat arriving whether you use it or not. So the south windows get worked by hand twice a day. Curtains open around 10 when the sun clears the trees. Closed again around 3 before the light goes on, and that same glass starts handing your heat back to the night. Every other curtain in the house stays shut. Federal energy guidance says properly oriented glazing can offset a real share of a house's heating load, 20% and better in the right building. That is not a small number for a habit that costs 2 minutes a day. The old builders sited a house for the sun because they had to. Post-war subdivisions site houses for the street because a wire could fix any mistake in the orientation. The sun comes up whether you open the curtain or not, friend. Open it. That one a wire made irrelevant. The next one is under your feet. The ground a few feet down holds a steady temperature all year. Cool in August and in January considerably warmer than the air above it. A cellar sitting in that ground is a buffer between your floor and the winter. That is why the old farmhouses here are built over a real cellar, and why so many of the stoves sit down in it. The cellar keeps the food, the cellar keeps the floor from freezing, and a stove down there sends its heat up through the floorboards into every room above. A house on a slab or over an open crawl space has none of that. It is sitting directly on the cold. You cannot dig a cellar this week. But if you have a crawl space with vents open to the wind all winter and a bare, uninsulated floor over it, that is very likely the coldest thing in your house. And dealing with it will do more than any heater you could buy. The ground is a warm thing in January. Use it or sit on top of the weather. That one your builder decided. Now the one I promised you at the top, here it is. Anthracite, hard coal, comes out of the ground about 100 miles north of where I am standing. A hard coal stove is a simple thing. A firebox, a grate, and a hopper above it. You fill the hopper, and as the coal at the bottom burns down, gravity feeds more in behind it. No pump, no blower, no electronics, no wire of any kind. One filling runs at something like 12 hours. Shake the grate down morning and evening, fill it, carry the ash out. That is the whole labor of the thing. And it holds a fire for a season. You light it in the fall and it stays lit. These are still built by hand. A few miles from this kitchen. Lancaster County makers, some of them Amish shops, selling to Amish families and to a good many English families who worked out. That a heater which does not stop when the grid stops is worth having. Coal is a real fuel with real requirements. Proper venting is not optional, and a carbon monoxide alarm is not optional either. But a thing with no moving parts is a thing that does not break. 12 hours on one filling, neighbor, and not one wire in it. That one is still being made by hand. The next one is mass. Third break. Everything from here down stops being a habit. It starts being a machine, something a man builds and then owns. And number 4 is the one in the picture that brought you here, the one with the coals glowing through the side. We are close now. 9 to go. Around a stove in an old farmhouse. You will often find a low bench of dry-laid stone or brick. Not mortared, most of them. Just fitted and stacked, knee-high, close enough to take the heat. The stove runs hot from morning to bedtime, and all that while the stone is drinking. Then the fire goes down and the stone starts giving it back, slow, low, for hours, after there is no flame left in the house at all. That is thermal mass, and it is the whole secret behind every serious heater on the back end of this list. A fire is a spike. Mass turns a spike into a curve. The stones cost a farmer nothing. He hauled them out of the field he was clearing anyway. Now the warning, and I want it plain, use dry, dense stone. Granite, dense fieldstone, fire brick. Never wet river rock, never anything that has been sitting in water. Trapped moisture turns to steam inside the stone, and it can break apart hard enough to hurt somebody. Dry and dense, that is the rule. The fire is the spark, friend. The stone is the furnace. That one costs a Saturday. The next one is the oldest heater on Earth. A resting adult puts out heat all night, roughly what a small lamp does, hour after hour, powered entirely by the supper you already ate. Put a family in one room under a good pile of wool and you have a heater running until morning that no company can meter. For 200 years, you did not heat the bedrooms. You warmed the bed, brick to the foot, quilts piled deep, and the bodies in the wool did the rest until dawn. The post-war ideal of a separate heated bedroom for every person made this feel like poverty. It is not poverty. It is efficiency. And it is the reason an unheated Amish bedroom in January is a perfectly comfortable place to sleep. Nobody is asking a modern family to give up their privacy, neighbor. But when the power goes out in February, one room, one pile of blankets, and the whole family in it is not desperation. It is the oldest heat we have. You already own this one. You are generating it right now. That one they made you feel poor for. The next one is on the table, a kerosene lamp on the table. In an Amish house is doing 2 jobs, and most people only count one. It is light, obviously, but a burning lamp is a small open flame putting out real heat into the room it sits in, hour after hour. A few lamps lit through a long winter evening is not nothing. It is a meaningful part of why a room stays comfortable after the sun is down. An electric bulb, by comparison, gives you light and essentially no useful heat, and it costs you every hour it burns. Here is the honest part, and I am not going to skip it. Any open flame indoors needs air. Kerosene and propane heaters need ventilation, And they need a working carbon monoxide alarm in the house. And that is not a suggestion, that is the price of using them at all. Every winter, somebody dies for want of a cracked window and a $5 battery. Do it right. And the same flame that lights your table is heating the room you are sitting in. One flame, two jobs. That is how a thing earns its fuel. That one asks for care. The next one, most Americans have never laid eyes on. Here it is, number 6, the one I promised. Pennsylvania German households built something our English neighbors never had.
A flat cast iron box set into the wall between the kitchen and the parlor.
Its open back fitted to the kitchen fireplace and its 5 closed sides sitting inside the next room. You fed it from the kitchen. It heated the parlor. No smoke, no ash, no second chimney, no fire in the room where the family was sitting. Just a large hot iron surface radiating heat into a space that had no hearth of its own. They were cast at the Pennsylvania ironworks through the 1700s, plates decorated with scripture and tulips, and the great museums here hold them today. And then the freestanding clothes stove arrived, which did the job better, and the ironworks quit casting them around the turn of that century. Most Americans have never seen one outside a glass case. The idea did not die, though. Feeding a fire from one room and taking heat in another is exactly what the 2 heaters after this one do. Our people were moving heat through walls before this country had a name for it. That one the museums kept. The next one Germany never gave up. Last break, friend. 5 to go, and every one of them is a system a family builds once and owns for good.
Number 4 is the picture. Stay with me. Our families came out of the German-speaking countries, and they came from a place where the answer to winter
was not a fire you sit in front of. It was a wall of masonry you live against. The German tile stove, the Kachelofen, is a firebox wrapped in a long, winding path of masonry channels. You burn one hot, fast, clean fire. The exhaust does not go straight up the chimney. It travels through many feet of stone and tile, giving up nearly all its heat to that mass on the way out. Then the fire is out, and the stove is warm for most of a day. One firing, then hours and hours of gentle, radiant heat, with no flame anywhere in the house. In Germany, families still build them. In this country, that tradition mostly ended. A proper certified masonry heater installed here now. It runs into the tens of thousands, and it takes a specialist. The knowledge did not die, it got priced. The one thing I will say plainly, masonry heaters are legitimate, certified, and code legal in this country when built to the association standards by somebody who knows how. This is not a weekend project with loose brick.
One fire in the morning, warm stone until night. That was our grandfather's answer. The next one is the same physics for $200.
This is the picture that brought you here. The idea is simple to say and remarkable to watch. You burn a small, fast, very hot fire in an insulated vertical channel, so hot and so well fed with air that the smoke itself burns instead of going up the pipe. Then you run the exhaust the long way, horizontally,
through a mass of clay and sand and stone, usually built as a bench, and every bit of remaining heat gets scrubbed out of it into that mass before it leaves the building.
Run right, the exhaust comes out the far end nearly cool enough to hold your hand near. Almost nothing goes to the sky. The bench stays warm long after the fire is out, and people sit on it. The materials are a steel drum, a run of stovepipe, insulating material and refractory mortar, a couple $100, and the fuel can be scrap wood or pellets you buy by the ton for the price of a few weeks of propane. Now the part I will not skip. Build it outside first and learn it out there. This is not a certified appliance, it is a site-built machine, which means your insurance and your local code both have opinions. And you need a real chimney and a carbon monoxide alarm before it ever comes indoors. Learn it in the yard, then do it properly or not at all. Nearly all the heat stays in the house, friend. That is the whole trick. That one you can build this month, the next one decides whether any of it works. Every single thing on this list fails on wet wood. Green wood is wet wood, and wet wood spends its heat boiling off its own water before it can warm anything of yours. What you get instead is smoke, a creosote-lined chimney, and a chimney fire waiting for a cold night in February. 2 rules. First, the species. Dense hardwoods, oak, hickory, locust, ash, maple, hard fruit woods, carry far more heat per cord than the soft, light woods. Second, And this matters more, the seasoning. Split it, stack it off the ground with the air moving through it, cover the top and leave the sides open, and give it a year. 2 if you can. If you did not split it last spring, it is not ready this fall. That is the honest answer, and there is no way around it. Here is what I do. The wood I am burning this winter was split 2 Aprils ago. The wood I split this spring is for the winter after next. That is the whole system. The stove is not your heater, neighbor. The stove is where the wood happens. That one takes a year to start. The next one is the building itself. Stand in an old Amish farmhouse and notice what it is not. The ceilings are not high, the rooms are not large, the doors between them close, the windows are modest and they face the right way, the stove is in the middle. None of that is style, friend. Every bit of it is heat. A big open floor plan with a 2-story ceiling is a beautiful thing to walk into and a terrible thing to warm, because you cannot heat a room, you can only heat a volume. And half that volume is up above where nobody lives. Modern building sells space. Space is the most expensive thing in an American winter, and it never appears on the price tag. It appears on the bill every month. For as long as you own the house, you are not rebuilding your house this week. But you can shut doors, hang a curtain across a big opening, and stop treating the whole volume as one room. That is choosing a smaller house without moving. Everything on this list works better in a small, tight room. Everything. Which brings us to number 1, and number 1 is not a heater. Number 1 is not a system. It is what every one of the 24 was pointing at. Go back to that ice storm. February of 2014, the lines down, 715,000 houses dark. Families sitting in the cold for a week waiting on a truck. And an English neighbor standing in our kitchen with his hands around a cup saying it was like it wasn't even happening here. We were not clever, friend. We were not prepared. We were not stockpiling anything. We simply had never handed the job over. The wood came off ground we work. The stove was built by a neighbor's hands. The heat came up through our own floor, and nobody outside that house had any say in whether it did. There was nothing to fail because there was nothing depending on anybody else. That is the whole of it, and the old word for it is not complicated. Sovereignty. Not a skill, a posture. Owning the means of your own warmth, the way a family owns the means of its own supper. The utility does not need you to be cold. It only needs you to have no other option. Now hear me plain before we close. I am not selling you the end of the world. The grid is fine, the trucks run, and it will very likely be there your whole life. And I am not your building inspector. Some of what I laid out here, your local code will look at sideways. So check your permits, vent every flame properly, never fully close a damper on a live fire, and put a carbon monoxide alarm in your house tonight, whether you do anything else on this list or not. And if you signed for a new furnace last year, neighbor, half your county did. That is not on you. They are good at selling. Pick one, just one, this week. Hang a heavy blanket across the biggest doorway in your house. That is tonight, and it is free. Or lay a rolled towel along the bottom of your front door and feel the difference by morning. Or set a clean, dry stone or a brick on your stove tonight, wrap it well, and put it at the foot of your bed. Or split and stack a face cord of oak now so it is ready by the winter after next. Our kitchen ran 74 degrees through that whole ice storm week, and the fuel for it was cut off our own ground in March. That is not a boast. That is what a stove and a woodpile do when nobody has taken them away from you. Tell me down below, did your grandparents heat with wood, with coal, or with something stranger than either? Name it. The one that gets the most replies is the one I go deep on next. Your people knew every one of these. Somebody just did not get the chance to hand them down to you. Mine never put them down. And now they are yours again. Next time on this channel, the 2-cent packet of dried leaves my great-grandmother kept in a tin over the stove that stopped a winter cough. In one night and the year the pharmacies quietly stopped stocking it. This is not a homesteading channel, friend. It is a kitchen with the door open. Keep what kept us.